Mythology by Jane Ellen Harrison. Introduction. We are all Greeks, says Shelley, in words thrice memorable. Our laws, our religion, our art have their roots in Greece. True, but with one large deduction. Our religion is not rooted in Greece. It comes to us from the East, though upon it too the spirit of the West and of Greece itself has breathed. What Greece touches, she transforms. Our religion, oriental as it is in origin, owes to Greece a deep and lasting debt. To formulate this debt, this is the pleasant task that lies before us. But first we must note clearly, our subject is not Greek and Roman religion, but Greek and Roman mythology. Each and every religion contains two elements, ritual and mythology. We have first what a man does in relation to his religion, i.e. his ritual, then what he thinks and imagines, i.e. his mythology, or if we prefer so to call it, his theology. Both what he does and what he thinks are alike informed and vivified by what he feels, what he desires. Psychology teaches us, and here we cannot do better than quote Professor Liuba, that the unit of conscious life is neither thought nor feeling nor will in separation, but, quote, all three in movement towards an object, unquote. But it must further be noted that the will is primal. Quote, conscious life is always orientated towards something to be secured or avoided immediately or ultimately, unquote. Religion, then, is only one particular form of the activities of conscious life. The religious impulse is directed to one end and one only, the conservation and promotion of life. This end it attains in two ways, one negative, by the riddance of whatever is hostile, one positive, by the impulsion of whatever is favorable to life. All the world over, religious rites are of two kinds, of expulsion and impulsion. Hunger and barrenness are the two first foes to man's life. These he seeks to expel. Food and fertility are his two primal gods. The Hebrew word for good meant primarily good to eat. Food and fertility he seeks to impel, to secure. Winter he drives out. Spring and summer he brings in. This primitive religious activity, these rites of expulsion and impulsion, this will to live in all its manifestations is worldwide. Greeks and Romans share it with Red Indians and South Sea Islanders. What then is it that is characteristically Greek or Roman? Wherein lies our debt? This brings us to the other side or phase or aspect of religion, to mythology. While man is carrying out his ritual, practicing his rites of expulsion or impulsion, he is also thinking or imagining. Some sort of image, however vague, rises in his mind, some mental picture, some imago of what he is doing and feeling. Why does such an image arise? Here psychology steps in to help us. Man is essentially an image maker, but it is his human prerogative. In most animals who act from what we call instinct, action follows on perception mechanically with almost chemical swiftness and certainty. In man, the nervous system is more complicated. Perception is not instantly transformed into reaction. There seems to be an interval for choice. It is just in this momentary pause between perception and reaction that our images, i.e. our imaginations, our ideas, in fact our whole mental life, is built up. We do not immediately react, i.e. we do not immediately get what we want, so we figure the want to ourselves, we create an image. If reaction were instant, we should have no image, no representation, no art, no theology. The clearness, the vividness of the image will depend on the natural gifts of the image maker. In one man's reaction, the image will be dim, confused, non-arresting. In another, it will be clear, vivid, forceful. It was the supreme genius of the Greeks, as contrasted with the Romans, that they were image makers, iconists. In Greek mythology, we have enshrined the images fashioned by the most gifted people the world has ever seen, and these images are the outcome, the reflection of that people's unsatisfied desire. Some decades ago, it was usual to call Greek gods by Roman names. For Athena, we said Minerva. For Eros, Cupid. For Poseidon, Neptune. This baleful custom is now happily dead. We now know that till they borrowed them from the Greeks, the Romans never had, in the strict sense of the word, any gods at all. They had vague daimonic beings, impersonal, ill-defined, and these beings they called not dei, gods, but noumena, powers. The Romans in the strict sense were never iconists. Such was not the genius of their race. They did not personify, did not create personalities, hence they could not tell stories about persons, could not create myths. They had little or no mythology. The Roman noumen is devoid of human characteristics. He has not even sex, or at least his sex is indeterminate. How indefinite the noumen is seen in the old prayer formula in which appeal is made to spirits, sive mas, sive femina, whether he be male or female. These vague spirits, or noumena, were associated with particular places and were regarded with vague feelings of awe, inclining towards fear rather than love. The real specialization of the noumen was not in his character, but in his function. This area of action was carefully circumscribed. He presided over some particular locality and activity of man, and the noumena were almost as numerous as the activities. Thus there is Cunina, who guards the child's cradle, Adulia and Potina, who teach him to eat and drink, Statilius, who makes him stand up, and so on. In fact, the noumen is only the image of an activity. He is never a personality, though he may be the first stage to impersonation. If then the noumena were superhuman, if they were in a sense lords over the Roman's life, if they inspired religio, awe, and a sense of obligation, they were never human, and of them there were no human-shaped, no anthropomorphic representations, either in poetry or plastic art. Varro tells us, and we could have no better authority, that, quote, for 170 years, unquote, dating from the foundations of the city in 753 BC, quote, the Romans worshipped their gods without images, unquote. He adds, and the comment is curiously one-sided and thoroughly Roman, quote, those who introduced representation among the nations took away fear and brought in falsehood, unquote. It was undeniably one supreme merit of the Greeks that from religion they took away fear. To the purely practical man, the iconist is apt to seem a liar. The Greeks themselves were in part conscious that they were iconists. One of the greatest of the sons of Greece has told us in simple words something of how the images were made and who were the image makers. Herodotus has left us this statement. Herodotus, who under the stimulus of foreign travel, and especially a visit to Egypt, had come to reflect on the characteristics of his own religion. He writes, quote, but as to the origin of each particular god, whether they all existed from the beginning, what were their individual forms, the knowledge of these things is, so to speak, but of today and yesterday. For Homer and Hesiod are my seniors, I think, by some 400 years, and not more. And it is they who have composed for the Greeks the generations of the gods, and have given to the gods their titles, and distinguished their several provinces and special powers, and marked their forms, unquote. Herodotus did not and could not know that the gods were the outcome, the utterance of human desire projected by rites of expulsion and impulsion. What he did know, thanks to his comparative studies, was that the Greek gods were a comparatively late product, and that these personal, accomplished gods had been preceded by an earlier stage in which the gods were not in the Greek sense gods at all, not distinct personalities with characteristic attributes and life histories, but shadowy, nameless powers, more like the Latin noumena. He knows of a race inhabiting Greece before Homer's days, and their gods, if gods they are to be called, are in marked contrast to those of Homer. Formerly, he says, quote, the Pelasgians, on all occasions of sacrifice, called upon gods, but they gave them no title, nor yet any name to any of them, unquote. The primitive Pelasgians, equally with the more civilized Greeks, worshipped some form of divinity. They offered sacrifice, they had ritual, but of what they sacrificed to, they had no clear conception. Their divinities were not individualized. They had not human forms. They were not called by proper names, such as Zeus and Athena. They were not even addressed by descriptive titles, such as the Loud Thunderer or the Gray-Eyed One. They were more like things or powers than persons. Comparative religion shows us that, as Herodotus first observed about the Greeks, so everywhere it is true that man only at a late stage attributes complete personality to the thing he worships. Personality comes with the giving of animal or human form. Before anthropomorphism, human form. Before theriomorphism, beast form. We have a stage of animism, when the gods are intangible forces dwelling anywhere and everywhere. They become real gods when man localizes them, gives them definite form, and enters into fixed relations with them. Then only when from powers they become persons can they have a mythology. Into the causes that led to complete impersonation we shall not now enter. Some of them will appear in the course of our examination of the individual gods. What is important for the moment to note is that only when a god becomes a god in the full sense, i.e., a person, can a life history, a myth, be made. Our business is with mythology. The Pelasgian divinities were impersonal. They had no myths. The same is true of the Roman noumena. They were impersonal and had no myths. What is known as Roman mythology, the mythology, for example, of Ovid, is only Greek mythology transplanted and transformed into a Roman medium. Our debt to Roman mythology is soon acknowledged and promptly discharged, for it is practically nil. Roman mythology as contrasted with Roman ritual is non-existent. The Romans were deeply religious, deeply conscious of their obligation to the unseen, but they were not iconists, image makers, mythologists, until late times and under Greek influence. The genius of their race forbade. The gods, says Herodotus, were composed by Homer and Hesiod. The poets gave to them their titles, their special powers, their forms. To Herodotus, Homer was a single person. To us, Homer is the whole epic tradition, the traditional book of the early Greeks, of a people of poets. The Greeks were not priest-ridden, they were poet-ridden, a people, as the word poet implies, of makers, shapers, artists. They started with the same religious material as other races, with fear of the unseen, with fetish worship, with unsatisfied desire, and out of this vague and crude material they fashioned their immortals, such as Hermes, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, Artemis, Apollo, Dionysus, Zeus. Jane Ellen Harrison, American Women's University Club, 4 Rue de Chevreuse, Paris. End of Section 0.